She laughed, not out of joy, but disbelief. "Solve this equation," she said, her voice echoing across the grand lecture hall. "And I'll marry you." The class burst into laughter. No one took her seriously, not even the janitor mopping the floor in the corner. But in less than 10 minutes, that laughter would die. Professor Evelyn Grace was known as the Iron Lady of Mathematics. Sharp mind, sharper tongue. She ruled Hillcrest University like a queen ruling her castle. Her students feared her brilliance, and her colleagues envied her fame. She wasn't just a teacher, she was a legend. That morning, sunlight poured through the tall windows as Evelyn scribbled a massive equation across the whiteboard. The symbols twisted and turned like a storm, infinity signs, differential loops, and impossible fractions. "This," she said proudly, "is the unsolved equation of recursive motion. Mathematicians have studied it for 30 years. No one has ever cracked it." A student raised his hand. "So, what's the point of showing us something we can't solve?" Evelyn smiled faintly. "To remind you that intelligence has limits, and some of us are born closer to the edge than others." The class chuckled, nervous and amused. Evelyn turned to grab her coffee, and that's when she noticed him, the janitor quietly sweeping near the back. His name was Liam Carter, mid-30s, ordinary uniform, tired eyes. "Mr. Carter," she called suddenly, half teasing, half curious. "You've been staring at my board for the last 2 minutes. You understand what this means?" Liam blinked, startled. "No, ma'am. Just looks interesting, that's all." Evelyn smirked. "Interesting, he says." The students laughed. "Do you even know what these symbols represent?" He hesitated. "Some of them. The lower function, it loops too early. The pattern's broken." The laughter stopped. Evelyn raised an eyebrow. "Oh, really?" He nodded slowly. "I's still on the board. It's recursive, but you're feeding the wrong variable into the sequence. That's why it never stabilizes." The class went silent. For a moment, even Evelyn didn't know what to say. Then she chuckled and folded her arms. "You're saying 30 years of research is wrong, because you, a janitor, think the pattern loops wrong?" Liam smiled softly. "I didn't mean it that way, ma'am. Just an observation." Evelyn tapped her chalk against the board. "Tell you what," she said with a smirk. "If you can fix this equation, I'll marry you myself." The class erupted in laughter again. Evelyn didn't mean it. It was pure sarcasm, a show of superiority. But Liam just looked at her, calm and steady. "Deal," he said quietly. She froze for a second, surprised at his confidence. "Go on then," she said, gesturing toward the board. "Impress us." Liam placed his mop aside and slowly walked to the front. Every eye in the room followed him. He picked up the chalk, the same one she'd used to challenge him, and stared at the equation for a moment. Then he began to write. The sound of chalk on the blackboard was sharp, clean, rhythmic. His hand moved fast but precise, cutting through lines of symbols, rewriting them, simplifying where needed. The students watched in silence, the room filled with the faint scratching of numbers meeting destiny. At first, Evelyn smiled, a kind of smug smile that said, "This will be entertaining." But the more he wrote, the quieter she became. Line after line, he peeled the equation open like a locked door finally giving way. Each transformation made perfect sense. Every simplification flowed into the next with the grace of music. And then, suddenly, it was done. Liam put the chalk down gently, his fingers white with dust. "There," he said softly. "The variable you missed was recursive, but only through inverse feedback. The equation stabilizes at 1.618. Evelyn stared at the board. Her brain spun through each step, trying to find a flaw. There wasn't one. Every move he made was clean, elegant, even. She felt her chest tighten. How did you do that?" He shrugged. "It just made sense." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "You solved it." The class gasped. Students stood, trying to see. Phones came out. Pictures snapped. A janitor had just solved an unsolvable equation in front of one of the greatest math minds in the country. And as if destiny was listening, the door suddenly opened. The dean, Dr. Foster, walked in mid-conversation with another faculty member. "Professor Grace, have you?" He stopped dead when he saw the board. His mouth fell open. That's the recursive equation of motion." Evelyn nodded slowly, still staring at Liam. "Yes, and he just solved it." The dean blinked. "Who?" Liam raised his hand awkwardly. Me, sir. Just cleaning up." The silence that followed was electric. No one moved. No one spoke. The dean turned to Evelyn. You can't be serious. But Evelyn wasn't smiling anymore. I am, she said quietly. He found the missing variable. Word spread across the university like wildfire. The janitor solved the impossible equation. By afternoon, the story was everywhere, in classrooms, cafeterias, even on social media. Students whispered his name in disbelief. Professors argued in hallways. And by evening, Evelyn Grace, the woman who never admitted defeat, sat alone in her office staring at the chalkboard, still trying to understand what had just happened. Liam Carter, a man with no degree, no title, no fame, had done in 10 minutes what brilliant minds couldn't do in decades. She looked out the window, watching him leave the campus under the fading sunset. For the first time in her career, she didn't feel superior. She felt something else. Something she hadn't felt in years: respect and curiosity. Because deep down, Professor Evelyn Grace knew this wasn't luck. That man carried a secret, and she was going to find out exactly what it was. The next morning, Hillcrest University didn't wake up, it exploded. Every student group chat, every hallway conversation, every staff meeting buzzed with one name: Liam Carter. The janitor solved it. No way it was staged. Professor Grace looked pale as a ghost. By 9 a.m., a small crowd had gathered outside the mathematics building. Reporters from the campus paper were already waiting by the door. Inside, Professor Evelyn Grace sat behind her desk, staring blankly at the stack of papers in front of her. She hadn't slept. Her mind kept replaying that moment. The sound of chalk, the quiet confidence in his voice, the way her years of work had been rewritten in minutes. She looked up as her assistant entered. "Ma'am," she said softly, "the dean wants you in the boardroom." Now, Evelyn stood, adjusted her glasses, and walked out. The halls were unusually quiet. Students stepped aside as she passed, whispering behind her back. When she reached the boardroom, the air was thick with tension. The dean, a few senior professors, and the head of the mathematics department were all seated. "Professor Grace," the dean began carefully, "we've reviewed the board recordings. It seems authentic." Evelyn nodded. "It is. I was there." A heavy silence followed. "Who exactly is this janitor?" one professor asked. "How did someone with no credentials even get near an equation like that?" Evelyn hesitated. "He didn't get near it. He just saw something we didn't." The dean sighed. "Genius doesn't just appear out of nowhere, Evelyn. Find out who he is. If his solution holds under peer review, this university could gain international recognition or ridicule, depending on how we handle it." Evelyn nodded stiffly. "Understood." When she stepped outside, Liam was cleaning the hallway floors, as usual, as if the world hadn't changed overnight. He looked up and smiled politely. "Morning, Professor." She crossed her arms. "You realize the entire faculty is talking about you?" He shrugged. "People talk. I just did what made sense." "You solved a problem unsolved for 30 years. That's not just making sense." She took a step closer, studying him. "Who taught you mathematics like that?" "My father," he said simply, dipping the mop back into the bucket. She frowned. "Your father was a mathematician?" "He was a mechanic," Liam replied. "But he saw patterns in everything. Engines, gears, sound, even time. He said numbers were the language the universe speaks when no one's listening." Evelyn blinked. There was poetry in his words, something rare among scientists. "You sound like someone who's studied advanced theory." Liam chuckled softly. "No, ma'am. I just read a lot. Libraries don't ask for degrees." Before she could respond, two students passed by, whispering loudly. "That's him. The genius janitor. Bro, imagine if she actually marries him." Evelyn's cheeks flushed slightly. Liam laughed under his breath. "Guess they're taking your joke seriously." "It wasn't a joke," she said instinctively, then caught herself. "I mean, it was obviously a metaphor." He smiled knowingly. "Sure, Professor." That night, she couldn't sleep again. Curiosity gnawed at her. Who was this man who spoke like a poet and thought like a scientist? She opened her laptop, searched the university's employment records, and pulled up his file. Liam Carter. Age, 34. Education, high school diploma, incomplete. Employment, custodial services, night shift. Emergency contact, none. That was it. Nothing else. No family listed, no background details, no references. It was as if he'd appeared out of thin air. The next morning, when she entered the math building, She found a group of students surrounding Liam again, this time with notebooks open. "Sir, can you explain how you got the stabilizing constant?" one asked eagerly. "Yeah, was it the golden ratio thing, or, guys, I'm not a teacher," Liam said, chuckling. "Ask Professor Grace." Evelyn approached, amused and slightly annoyed. "Maybe you should give the lecture today," she teased. He raised his hands. "Not a chance. I'm just cleaning up after geniuses, remember?" But that night, something unexpected happened. The video of Liam solving the equation, recorded secretly by a student, went viral. Millions of views in hours. The janitor who outsmarted the professor trended across platforms. Within 2 days, news channels picked it up. Commentators debated whether it was real. Some called him a prodigy. Others called it staged humiliation. And through it all, Liam kept working quietly, mopping floors while the world argued about him. The dean called Evelyn again. "This has gone global. We've had calls from MIT, Oxford, even the Tokyo Institute. They want to review the equation. We'll need both of you at the press briefing tomorrow." "Both of us," she repeated. "Yes," he said firmly. "You're his supervising academic. Like it or not, Professor Grace, you're now part of history." The next day, the lecture hall overflowed with journalists, students, and cameras. Evelyn stood at the podium, her heart pounding. Beside her, Liam adjusted his uniform collar nervously. When she introduced him, the crowd erupted in applause. Reporters shouted questions. "Mr. Carter, how did you do it? Professor, do you feel overshadowed? Is it true you promised to marry him if he solved it?" The flash of cameras filled the room. Evelyn forced a smile. "That was clearly a joke," she said, her voice calm but her hands trembling slightly. "What matters here is the brilliance of the human mind, no matter where it comes from." Liam leaned into the microphone. "I didn't mean to embarrass anyone," he said softly. "I just saw a problem and tried to fix it." The humility in his tone silenced the room. Even Evelyn glanced at him with something like admiration. When it was over and the reporters left, she caught him in the hallway. "You handled that well," she said. He smiled faintly. "Guess my mop skills aren't my only talent." She laughed for the first time in days. "You might be the most unpredictable person I've ever met, Liam Carter." He looked at her for a long second, his voice quiet but sincere. "And you might be the only person who ever looked at me like I wasn't invisible." Something flickered between them. Respect, curiosity, maybe something deeper. But neither of them realized that the attention they'd drawn had awakened people from Liam's past. People who weren't happy to see him back in the spotlight. And soon, the equation wouldn't be the only mystery Professor Evelyn Grace would have to solve. That night, Professor Evelyn Grace sat in her dimly lit office long after everyone had gone home. The university was silent, except for the hum of the air conditioner and the faint ticking of a wall clock. She stared at the framed equations on her wall, but all she could see was his handwriting, the clean, effortless lines of a man who shouldn't have known those symbols at all. Her phone buzzed. A notification from social media. The genius janitor who solved the impossible. Hundreds of thousands of likes. Thousands of comments. Some called Liam a hidden Einstein. Others accused the university of covering something up. She sighed and shut off her phone. Fame had found him overnight, but fame wasn't what worried her. It was something else, something behind his eyes. The next morning, Evelyn decided to do something she hadn't done in years. She followed her curiosity instead of her logic. When she arrived early, she found Liam already at work, mopping the marble corridor. "You're early," she said. He smiled. "So are you." She hesitated before asking. "Liam, can I take you out for coffee?" He blinked. "Coffee? With you?" She chuckled. "Don't look so shocked. It's not a date. Think of it as academic curiosity." He grinned. "All right, Professor. But I warn you, I take my coffee very seriously." They walked to a small cafe just outside the campus, a quiet, warm place where no one recognized them. For a while, they talked like old friends. She asked about his childhood. He deflected with humor. She asked about his family. He said little. But when she mentioned mathematics, his eyes lit up. "I used to sneak into the public library when I was a kid," Liam said, his hands wrapped around his mug. "They had this old math encyclopedia, broken spine, missing pages. I used to sit on the floor and copy equations onto napkins." Evelyn smiled softly. "And you understood them?" "Not always," he said. "But numbers have a rhythm. Once you hear it, you can't unhear it." She tilted her head. You talk about math like it's music. It is music, he said quietly. Every formula hums its own tune. You just have to listen hard enough. There was a pause, a moment of connection neither of them expected. Evelyn looked at him differently now. Not as the man who embarrassed her, but as someone extraordinary. But their quiet moment was interrupted when a black car pulled up outside the cafe. A man in a dark suit stepped out, tall, serious, expression cold. He walked straight to their table. Mr. Carter, the man said flatly. We need to talk. Liam's entire demeanor changed. His shoulders stiffened. I told you people to leave me alone. The man ignored Evelyn completely. It's not that simple. You disappeared for 3 years. You think no one would notice? Get out, Liam said firmly. The man's eyes flicked toward Evelyn. Does she know who you really are? Evelyn frowned. Excuse me, what's going on? But before she could say another word, Liam stood abruptly, stepping between her and the man. Leave, he said again, his tone low, dangerous. The man glared at him, then adjusted his jacket and walked out. Evelyn stared at Liam, her voice trembling slightly. Who was that? He sat down slowly, rubbing his temples. Just someone from a life I left behind. What life? She pressed gently. He hesitated. Let's just say I wasn't always a janitor. I worked in a government research program. We were trying to design predictive models using infinite recursion. It went wrong. People got hurt. Evelyn's breath caught. So that equation, he nodded. It wasn't just math. It was part of that project. I thought it was buried forever. But when you wrote it on the board, it all came back. Evelyn leaned forward, whispering, Liam, are you saying that equation isn't theoretical? That it's connected to something real? He looked her straight in the eyes. It was meant to calculate outcomes, human decisions, chaos, probabilities. If completed, it could predict behavior. They called it the infinity loop. She froze. You're telling me you just solved a formula that can predict people? Liam's voice dropped. Not exactly. But it can map patterns, emotions, actions, decisions. That's why they wanted it. And that's why I left. Evelyn sat back, trying to process it. The man she thought was a humble janitor was actually a runaway genius from a classified research program. Why didn't you tell anyone? She asked softly. Because the moment I do, he said, they'll come for me again. And this time, they won't just want my math. They'll want control. Outside, rain began to fall, streaking the cafe window. Evelyn felt her heart pounding. She had stepped into something far bigger than academia. Then we can't let them take it, she said. He looked at her, surprised. We? She nodded. You solved it in my class. My name is attached to it now. If they come for you, they'll come for me too. So yes, we. Liam smiled faintly, almost in disbelief. You're a dangerous woman, Professor Grace. And you, she said with a small grin, are terrible at staying out of trouble. But behind their light words, both of them knew. This wasn't just about equations anymore. They were sitting on something the world would kill to possess. That night, when Evelyn returned home, she found an envelope slipped under her door. No name, just a wax seal. Inside was a single note. He shouldn't have solved it. You're being watched. Her hands trembled. She looked out her window. The street was empty, but the feeling of being watched crept over her like cold air. She picked up her phone and called Liam immediately. He answered on the second ring. Professor. Liam, she whispered, someone knows. They left me a note. He didn't hesitate. Pack a bag. Come to my place. Right now. Evelyn's heart raced. She grabbed her coat and stepped into the storm outside, not realizing that by the time she reached Liam's apartment, nothing in their lives would ever be the same again. Rain poured down like the sky was trying to wash the world clean. Evelyn clutched her coat tightly as she ran through the narrow street toward Liam's apartment. Each flash of lightning cut across the sky, revealing dark silhouettes and trembling shadows. By the time she reached his building, she was soaked to the bone. Liam opened the door before she could even knock. You got here fast, he said, pulling her inside. Someone left this under my door, she said breathlessly, handing him the envelope. He tore it open again, reading the notes silently. His expression hardened. They've found me, he whispered. Who are they exactly, Liam? She asked, her voice trembling slightly. You keep saying that, but I don't even know who we're running from. He took a deep breath. They're called the Vector Initiative. It started as a government think tank, mathematicians, physicists, computer scientists. The goal was to create predictive models using infinite recursion to forecast human behavior. But it stopped being science a long time ago. They wanted to weaponize it, to predict wars, markets, elections, even people's choices. Evelyn stared at him in disbelief. And you worked for them? I helped build the framework, he admitted. Before I realized what it was for, the infinity loop equation was supposed to help machines understand decision patterns. But when I saw they were using it to control people, I destroyed my research and disappeared. Evelyn looked down at the note again. And now that you solved it again, they want it back. He nodded slowly. They don't care who gets hurt. Thunder cracked outside. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Evelyn said quietly, "We can't stay here." Liam looked up. "Where would we go?" "I know someone," she said. "An old friend from Cambridge. She's a data security researcher. If anyone can help us hide this equation, or protect it, it's her." Liam hesitated. "Are you sure we can trust her?" Evelyn met his eyes. "She once saved my career. I owe her everything." Within minutes, they packed, just a few essentials. Liam tucked a flash drive into his jacket, the only copy of the full equation he had. They slipped out the back door of the apartment complex, blending into the rain. By the time dawn broke, they were on a train heading north. Evelyn dozing lightly against the window, Liam sitting across from her, watching the world blur by. She stirred awake and caught him looking. "You haven't slept?" she murmured. "Can't," he said softly. "When I close my eyes, I keep seeing numbers and faces I'd rather forget." Evelyn smiled faintly. "You're not the only one haunted by your work, you know." Liam tilted his head. "You too?" She nodded slowly. "I spent years chasing recognition. I thought if I could prove I was the smartest in the room, it would make me happy. But when you solved that equation, I realized something. Brilliance without compassion means nothing." He looked at her for a long moment, then said quietly, "You're not what I expected, Professor." "Neither are you, Mr. Janitor," she replied with a soft smile. The train rolled on. Somewhere between the thunder and the rhythm of the rails, a strange peace settled between them. Fragile, unspoken, but real. When they finally reached a small coastal town, Evelyn led him through winding streets until they reached a modest cottage on the edge of the cliffs. The sea crashed below like an endless heartbeat. "This is Dr. Harper's place," she said. "She's off the grid. No social media, no government tracking. If we're lucky, she's home." She knocked 3 times. After a long pause, the door opened. A woman in her 40s, with wild curls and sharp eyes, stared at them. "Evelyn Grace," she said flatly. "I haven't seen you since Cambridge. Why do you look like you've been chased through a thunderstorm?" "Because we have," Evelyn said simply. "Harper, we need your help." Inside, the house was filled with old computers, tangled wires, and humming servers. It smelled like coffee and electricity. Harper poured them both cups of tea while Evelyn explained everything. The equation, Liam, the vector initiative. When she finished, Harper sat back, whistling softly. "Well," she said, "you've really outdone yourself this time. You two just painted targets on your backs the size of satellites." Liam leaned forward. "Can you hide us?" "I can bury digital footprints," Harper said. "But the people you're describing, they don't just track data. They track people. The moment you logged into that press conference, you gave them access to facial recognition networks worldwide." Evelyn's heart sank. "So what do we do?" Harper's eyes flicked toward the flash drive in Liam's jacket. "We destroy it." Liam shook his head instantly. "No, that equation can't just vanish. It's not the equation that's evil. It's the people who use it." Evelyn nodded. "He's right. Knowledge isn't the enemy." Harper groaned. "Great. 2 geniuses, 1 moral dilemma. You sound like my last dissertation panel." Liam smiled slightly. "You can't unlearn discovery, Harper. Someone, someday, will find it again. If we destroy it, we lose our only chance to guide how it's used." Harper sighed, then pointed to a spare bedroom. "You two rest. I'll set up an encrypted network. But if I were you, I'd prepare to run again. They'll find this place eventually." That night, Evelyn lay awake listening to the ocean outside. The wind howled against the glass, but inside, it was quiet, too quiet. She turned to see Liam sitting by the window, staring out into the dark. "You should sleep," she said softly. "I can't," he murmured. "I keep thinking, maybe solving that equation was a mistake." She stood and walked over. "It wasn't," she said gently. "It revealed who you really are, and who they really are." He looked up at her, eyes tired but warm. "You think we'll make it through this?" She smiled faintly. We've already done the impossible once. Outside, the waves crashed harder, and far in the distance, headlights flickered through the fog, slowly approaching the cottage. They didn't know it yet, but the Vector Initiative had already found them. And by morning, the chase would truly begin. The wind howled outside the cottage as dawn crept through the clouds. Evelyn woke with a start, the faint sound of an engine echoing beyond the cliffs. Liam was already awake, standing by the window, his eyes sharp. "They're here," he said quietly. Evelyn rushed to Harper's lab. The computer screens glowed with cascading lines of code. Harper looked up from the keyboard. Thermal drones overhead. At least 3 SUVs approaching from the forest road. "We've got maybe 10 minutes. Can you block them?" Evelyn asked. "Not for long," Harper said grimly. "They're pinging every satellite network. These people aren't amateurs." Liam grabbed the flash drive from the desk. "Then we finish this before they reach us." Evelyn stared at him. "Finish what?" He turned to her, his voice steady, almost calm. "The equation. The final sequence. I never closed it. There's a recursive failsafe buried in the code, something I designed years ago. If I complete it now, it'll encrypt itself permanently, turn the equation into an unsolvable paradox. No one will ever use it again." Harper's eyes widened. "That's suicide. If you trigger the loop manually, you'll fry every system within a mile, including your brain if you're connected." Evelyn's heart pounded. "Liam, no," he smiled faintly. "You said it yourself, Professor. Knowledge isn't the enemy. But sometimes, the price of keeping it safe is letting it go." Outside, headlights cut through the fog. Men in tactical suits stepped out, weapons slung, moving fast toward the cottage. Harper cursed under her breath. "They're here. I'll hold them off as long as I can." She ran toward the control room, locking the steel shutters. Evelyn grabbed Liam's hand. "There has to be another way." He looked at her, eyes soft despite the chaos. "All my life, I was the man people ignored. The janitor who swept their messes. But you saw me. You believed in me. Let me do this, Evelyn. Let me matter." Tears filled her eyes. "You already do." He brushed his thumb against her cheek, then turned back to the terminal. The monitors flared to life, numbers spilling across the screen like digital rain. Evelyn watched as the infinity loop equation appeared, lines upon lines of symbols and variables spiraling into motion. Then, with one final keystroke, Liam connected the failsafe. The computers began to hum, louder, faster, until the whole room trembled. The air shimmered with static, lights flickering violently. Evelyn covered her ears as a deep, resonant tone filled the air, the sound of power folding in on itself. Outside, the approaching agents froze as the ground shook. Their equipment short-circuited, communication lines went dead, and their visors filled with static. Inside, Liam's body went rigid, his fingers still on the keyboard. "Liam!" Evelyn screamed, running to him. "Liam, stop!" But it was too late. The monitors burst into a blinding white light. Then, silence. When Evelyn opened her eyes, the entire system was dead. Smoke rose from the servers. The screen that once displayed infinite numbers now showed just one word: terminated. She turned to Liam. He was slumped over the desk, motionless. "No," she whispered, shaking him. "Liam, please. Please wake up." His eyes fluttered weakly. A faint smile curved his lips. "Did it work?" he murmured. Evelyn nodded through tears. "Yes, you did it. It's gone." He exhaled slowly. "Then maybe it was worth it." She gripped his hand tightly. "Don't you dare leave me." He managed a soft chuckle. "You're giving orders to a janitor again." Evelyn laughed through her tears, and in that broken, trembling laugh, something beautiful lingered. Outside, sirens wailed as the agents retreated, their systems fried, their mission failed. The storm finally began to break, sunlight piercing through the gray horizon. Hours later, Harper returned to the room, her face pale but determined. "They're gone," she said quietly. "The equation's been wiped clean from every traceable network. Whatever he did, it worked." Evelyn sat beside Liam, who now slept peacefully, a faint pulse steady beneath her fingertips. Harper placed a hand on her shoulder. "You saved a lot of people today." Evelyn shook her head. "He did." Harper looked at Liam, then back at her. "What will you do now?" Evelyn gazed out at the sea, where waves glimmered under the rising sun. "Start over," she said softly. "Teach again, maybe. But this time, I'll teach them that brilliance means nothing without kindness." Harper nodded, then left quietly, leaving them alone. Evelyn leaned closer to Liam, whispering, "When you wake up, I'll tell you something I should have said a long time ago." For a moment, she thought she saw his lips curve into the smallest smile. Days later, news spread across the scientific community. The mysterious disappearance of the Infinity Loop project, the unexplained power surge that crippled multiple intelligence networks. No one ever found proof of what happened or who caused it. But at a small coastal university months later, a new professor joined the faculty. Her name, Dr. Evelyn Grace. Her assistant, a quiet man who preferred to keep the floors spotless and the equations flawless, was simply known as Liam. And sometimes, late at night, students passing by the lecture hall would see the two of them laughing softly over a chalkboard filled with numbers, equations that glowed faintly under the moonlight, beautiful and harmless, just the way they were meant to be. Evelyn would glance at him, eyes filled with pride, and say, "You still think you're just a janitor?" Liam would smile. "No, professor. I think I'm finally where I belong." And outside, the ocean whispered against the cliffs, carrying with it a secret. The story of a woman who challenged the impossible, and a man who solved it not with genius, but with heart. As the camera fades out, Evelyn's voice echoes in the background, calm, reflective, and full of truth. Sometimes the smartest person in the room isn't the one with the title. It's the one who never stopped believing that he could change the world, even with a mop in his hand. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you that real intelligence isn't about degrees or titles, but about courage and kindness, then don't forget to show some love. Hit that like button, share this story with someone who needs a little hope today. And if you enjoy stories that make you feel, think, and believe, then make sure to subscribe to the channel. Because here, every story reminds us that even the most ordinary people can do something extraordinary. Thank you for watching. See you in the next story, where hearts speak louder than words.